Hello, everyone. Welcome to all of you in this webinar where we're going to discuss a very important issue that drew the attention of the public opinion throughout the different periods, and it's about the conflict around the Libyan Central Bank and its impact on the stability and on the economy at the national, regional, and international levels. We are giving you now a brief overview of this conflict. Of course, the indicators of this conflict started ever since the first half of the year 2023. And of course, the tensions have started between the LCB and the government of Tripoli. And there were different scenarios behind this conflict, maybe some conflicts and disagreements related to the management of the public debt. And of course, Mr. Sadiq Al-Kabir, the past governor, had imposed some measures, and this had exacerbated the conflicts between the government of Tripoli, of Mr. Dubaiba, and the LCB. And of course, in 2024, the tensions got exacerbated after the dismissal of the Sadiq Al-Kabir. And of course, Mr. Mohammed Shukr was involved, and this has led to internal divisions and internal tensions, as well as security tensions witnessed by the capital, Tripoli. And of course, this conflict had impacted the work when it comes to oil as well. And so we've had an increase in the oil prices from 2 to 5%. And of course, the UN mission had intervened with some dynamic measures, and this has led to the settlement of the issue. And there was a new agreement to appoint a new governor based on the political agreement of 2015 between the higher council state and the House of Representatives. And in this webinar, we are going to shed light on the dimensions of this agreement, and we are going to talk about the political and economic dimensions as well as social dimensions. And we are going to focus on the local vision and the perspective from a Libyan angle. First, we would like to thank you for your presence and for your interaction, and we're looking forward to a fruitful discussion with our guests that we're going to introduce. Dr. Hassan Lashlem, lecturer in the Misrata University, and he is an expert in the national interests, and he has had a very large experience in reconciliation at the local level. Mrs. Esraa, also, she is a lecturer. Mr. Atiya, professor of Benghazi University and economic expert. Mr. Husni Bey, who is a businessman and the founder and chairman of the HB Group. Before starting, we are going to draw your attention to 4 main observations. So the webinar is being supervised by the IFIT Institute for Integrated Transitions. It is going to be a discussion followed by questions and answers. And this webinar is going to be published also in Arabic on the 8th of November 2024 at 11 Libyan time, and it's going to be repeated again on a Saturday at 5 Libyan time. We are going to remind you of a very important point here. Of course, you may express your opinions, and this doesn't reflect the opinion of the IFIT, but only the opinion of the persons who have expressed that opinion. So you have also simultaneous interpretation to English and to Arabic, and you may use that feature on Zoom. So we shall start with our guests. Thank you again for your presence, and we shall start with Dr. Hassan Lashlem, so that he could give us and share with us his vision and his perspective based on different aspects. Dr. Hassan, first of all, hello, and I hope you're fine. Dr. Hassan, we are trying to understand the Libyan Central Bank agreement, and we shall be focusing on different points. How come this agreement has been reached very swiftly? And based on different analysts and experts, this agreement is very important. What are the items of this agreement, and what were the role of the intermediaries and the national and international stakeholders. So, according to your expertise and the perspective when it comes to national reconciliation, what do you think? Can this agreement be a central opportunity for reconciliation? Can many other opportunities be built on this agreement for national reconciliation? Dr. Hassan, the floor is yours, and you have 10 minutes just to clarify and to respond to these questions. Thank you, Mr. Misbah. I hope my voice is clear. I would also like to thank the Institute for Integrated Transitions, the IFIT, for this webinar. And I'd like to thank as well the different experts and all the colleagues. Of course, I'm not an expert in the financial or academic matters or wealth in Libya. Of course, people who work in trade and industry have more expertise in this regard, such as Mr. Husni, for example. But since I'm the first to speak, I would be glad to answer some questions from a social and cultural perspective. Based on the fact that I've worked in academia and I've worked on issues related to national reconciliation specifically, I think that the wealth management in Libya and everything that has been raised around this issue ever since the 60s is very cumulative. What we're witnessing today is very natural. It's a natural process that we've reached. It's a kind of a deadlock that led us to a kind of a collapse, the collapse of the whole state, because the natural wealth normally in some countries would normally be subject to a social and economic study. It's all about the wealth management, the wealth distribution. There are many experiences, for example, in Norway, which is an oil country as well. However, unfortunately, with the Libyan case, when the state shifted from being a state that received aid and assistance to an income generating state, here the conflict started, and here the problems started ever since the 60s. And we have literature around this that may be followed up on. And there are different issues related to the wealth management. When the transition took place in 2011, it wasn't simple. It wasn't just about uprisings and revolutions. It wasn't just a political process on the issue of governance and how to govern. The wealth issue was a main issue in Libya because there was a feeling that the wealth wasn't managed conveniently, and the wealth in Libya were the main factor and the main element of the conflict. So how can we manage the wealth? How can we distribute the wealth? These were problematics that led us to where we are today. And to the conflict around managing the wealth and the funds during wars and the inflation and expenditure, etc. And so this has led us to where we are today. And of course, when the governor of the central bank was dismissed, we've reached a real deadlock. And this has led us as observers to believe that the international community will not stand still before the total collapse of the state, because everything, in fact, has come to an end despite all the wars. In fact, the banking institution remained swinging between the different parties, but it never reached what it has reached 2 or 3 months ago. And this has led us to be very surprised. So, in a country where we have a political and constitutional deadlock, suddenly we have a solution, which is a kind of a magical solution, right? In 2 to 3 weeks, and things get back to legitimacy, to normal, and a governor is elected, the vice governor is elected, and a board of directors is appointed. So this has been done easily and unexpectedly easily. And of course, in every political agreement, we have some tensions, especially when it comes to the Libyan Central Bank. And so we've reached kind of an impossibility to reach an agreement around the sovereign positions. But in fact, the magical agreement that was reached, of course, it has different political dimensions. And I do believe that the international community has had its word to say here, especially some states that intervened. And of course, it's still very dangerous. The situation is still very dangerous. And the things who are following up on the financial matters know that perfectly well. But at least, generally speaking, this has given some sense of comfort to the international community that maybe a solution has been reached and that the institution hasn't collapsed dramatically as it has sounded from the beginning. So, linking the LCB agreement and the items of the agreement, in fact, well, the most important things about the items in the agreement is the legislative coverage of the election of a board of director and the management of the LCB, regardless of the items inside of the agreement that have been reached, as I've said, magically. And this gives rise to different question marks when it comes to the reaction of the different political parties. So this is going to be, of course, clarified in the upcoming days. But linking the LCB agreement on the one hand and the national reconciliation, and I was part of that, especially when it comes to the social contract sessions. In fact, you've talked to us about the social contract, Mr. Misbah, and it was all about the wealth. And this was the main theme, especially for some of the parties in Libya, the issue of marginalization, the relation between the central government and the margins. So it was all about the oil, the regions of production of oil and the exports of oil. So this was one of the hottest topics. And of course, it was all about knowing how to manage the oil wealth in Libya. Undoubtedly, when you have a good agreement, that would help you to rationalize the expenditure, that would help you to have a real financial policy of the state. And this would, in fact, enable to manage the wealth and distribute the wealth equally. And this would, of course, impact positively the national reconciliation, which is par excellence a political issue today. Here, we are making a difference between reconciliation as a slogan branded by the different political parties and through which sometimes we have this give and take relationship. And on the other hand, we have a reconciliation, which is a continuous recovery and a community that, in fact, works on healing the injuries. We all know that the national reconciliation at the economic level is very important. We all know about the impact of the local war on the economy when migration or displacement take place, or when the capital is subject to a certain risk. In fact, this doesn't only threaten the families, those who have migrated are industrialists, traders, craftsmen. So here we're talking about some traders who get displaced from the south to the north, from the east to the west, etc. Of course, these are also impacted, especially throughout wars. We all know about the high costs, the high economic costs, and we all know about the role of the economic aspect when it comes to the national reconciliation and the relationship between the different parties. So any financial stability that takes place in the country undoubtedly is going to positively impact the situation. Of course, it's very difficult now to forecast the impact of this agreement. I hope I've given you a brief overview, at least when it comes to some obsessions felt by the citizen or felt by us as observers at the social level or at the levels related to reconciliation, and the echo of that reconciliation on the situation and on the economy, especially in Libya, on the Libyan state as well, and on the cohesion of the society, and on limiting that or the different problems we are suffering from. Thank you. Before moving to Dr. Husni, Dr. Hassan, I have a question between the relationship between the national reconciliation or even the local reconciliation on the one hand, and maybe the equitable distribution of the wealth returns. What is the relation between the two? So, do you think that the reconciliation should come first, and then after that we would have a rational strategic management of the wealth returns, or specifically the equal distribution of the wealth returns, or is it the other way around? Well, Mr. Misbah, it's very complicated because that's a radical relationship. So, any good process, so let's say any equitable distribution, if we have a rational policy adopted by the different political parties, if they agree on rationalizing the distribution and the management of the wealth, and normally the community and the society is fast to respond because the society, in fact, is greatly adapting to the new situations. So, you have all seen in the social contract that there were headlines on how to manage the wealth. The 1,050 who had gathered in Tunisia throughout the 3 years have put specific items on how to manage the wealth for the politicians, for example, from the regions where oil is produced to other regions where we have the real governance, the local management of the wealth, etc. Solutions have been given for the reconciliation. Even the society itself, be it the social contract or otherwise, the social contract gives headlines on how to manage the wealth and how to manage the state. Even Libya, when it was created as a state after independence, of course, it was all about Libya from east to west. And what was important is to know what the form of the state would be after independence. So when the world has issued the decision of the independence of Libya, this was not arbitrary. And sometimes even it was a bit painful for some of the people. But that was a real analysis of what was wanted by the society. So sometimes it's the society that imposes the form of the distribution of the wealth. Thank you so much. I think these are very clear answers. Thank you so much. We shall get back to you with more questions. We move now to Mr. Husni Bey, a very well-known businessman, founder and head of the HB Group. Mr. Husni, first of all, hello. And we can start with you to talk about the importance of the agreement, especially within the context of the renewed economic crisis in Libya, especially the short and long-term or even medium-term impact on the regime. So how would the agreement impact the monetary and financial system in Libya? And what are the potential impacts on the Libyan dinar, especially when it comes to the inflation and the banking sector? So the floor is yours, Mr. Hosni. Thank you. I'm very happy to take part in this webinar, and I would like to thank Dr. Hassan, who has, in fact, pointed out to the problem. There's no crisis that has ever emerged but on economic grounds. Maybe we would brand some slogans, we would raise some ideas, but all conflicts ever since the beginning of humanity have been economic conflicts. We have to understand at the end of the day that the Libyan Central Bank has nothing to do with the wealth distribution. The LCB is just as any other bank. The difference is that we deposit funds in this bank, which may be, let's say, a commercial bank or a central bank. So we do that as individuals, and then the expenditure takes place through that bank based on a budget and based on a political agreement or based on the law or based on the constitution that is issued by the legislative power. And unfortunately, that power is currently divided. And then the project is, or the draft is subject or submitted to the government, which is still divided in Libya. And the LCB is entrusted with managing these funds and spending these funds based on this budget, based on that general budget. And the main problem that had taken place in the past, and of course, this is nothing new. This has not been created in 2023. In fact, the issue has been created in 2004, ever since 2014, ever since the division inside of the Libyan Central Bank and the board of directors of that bank, including the collapse of the Libyan dinar throughout these 10 years. And we've seen that the real value and its purchase value has decreased by more than 80%, if not 100%. And if we are to go back to the errors are being repeated ever since 1980. So ever since 1980 until now, the purchase power of the Libyan dinar has decreased by 95%. So the Libyan dinar, in fact, one day it was $1 for 333 dirham, but now $1 uh, equals maybe one dinar. So let's say that what had happened throughout the last 10 years after the internal division of the Libyan Central Bank and the politicization in a way or another of the work of the Libyan Central Bank, what had happened is that an error was rectified with another error. So when you rectify an error with another error, then you would have a very complex error and a doubled error. But in Libya, the error was rectified with an error. And as said by Dr. Hassan, finally, we have taken the legitimate measures that go hand in hand with the temporary constitutional declaration and its amendments. And in fact, a new board of directors was appointed and a new governor was appointed by the legislative power based on an agreement between the two legislative bodies. And of course, this option has suggested the 6 independent members, and we have really hoped that most of them would be economists. But we have noted that most are from the accounting and financial backgrounds. And we are waiting for the first meeting of these experts so that they would be working as a Libyan central bank, as a real bank. And the fundamentals of the work of the LCB is not the collection of dollars or to increase the reserves in dollar, because that should result through what is called transitioning to reserves that would be managed by the Libyan Central Bank. But one of the most important tasks of the LCB is to establish a kind of a monetary stability and, of course, shutting down the inflation. So here, a favorable and conducive environment should be created for growth and for stability. But unfortunately, in fact, this has not happened because we've witnessed the division. But we are optimistic, generally speaking. The Libyan Central Bank is unified now, and for the first time, some real problems have been dealt with. And here I would like to remind you of one thing. Despite the fact that many do believe that the UN or the UNSMIL, that is the UN mission, have had the main say in this, but I think that the internal Libyan pressure was really huge. It was very big because it was well known that no error and no risk, as what we've witnessed, could be accepted as a real fact. We have a sovereign force that has really good external relations. And so those who are mandated to form the committee or to form the board of directors have come out and have said that maybe those who are previously appointed are not very competent. So this is why the error was rectified with an error, but now we are on the right track again. It is said that the first meeting of the board of directors would be on a Sunday, And from then on, we shall be moving forward. And I'm ready to answer your questions, of course. But generally speaking, the biggest pressure was from the inside, and the agreement came from the inside between the House of Representatives and the Higher Council of State. And the choice was based on an agreement, based on the law, based on the constitution, and based on the Libyan Central Bank code. So all of these are positive indicators that might show that us as Libyans, if ever we want to reach an agreement, then we are able to do so. Now, regarding the other thing, and allow me to go back to that issue, it's about wealth. Of course, our problem in Libya is that the wealth, instead of it going up from the bottom to the head of the pyramid, so instead of being bottom up, so from the people to the government, and then uh, for it to be redistributed to the population, unfortunately, it's one directional. It's as if the government is giving the money to the people. It's as if the money is not the money of the people. It's the money of those who are governing. So those who are governing would see themselves as having an absolute power in managing the wealth. But this is not the truth, because the public funds are those that pertain to the people. And the government is nothing but an elite of those people who are managing the affairs of the state. The state is the land, and we are the people. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Husni. Thank you so much. You have raised very important points, and we shall be commenting on those at the end of the webinar. Before getting back to you with some questions, we shall move back to you just to cover some of the political impacts of the agreement. And we will be giving the floor now to Mrs. Esraa, who is a researcher in the economic affairs, and also she graduated from the economic faculty in Libya. And she's an activist, and she will be giving us just a brief overview of the economic and political challenges after the agreement. And Mrs. Esraa, if you could just focus in a way or another on the political landscape before the agreement, and what about the different rival factions, the main players? What about also the regional impact of this agreement? And also, there's another question. So, how can this agreement impact the balance of power between the political and governmental institutions that are already divided, just to be more accurate? And maybe another question: how can the impact of the external and foreign forces change? For example, Turkey, Russia, how can that impact the future of Libya post-agreement? And what are the potential risks of seeing the conflict renewed after the agreement, and in case the agreement collapses? Or what about the risks related to that? Mr. Esraa, the floor is yours.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. I would like to thank all the colleagues whom have talked about the different points. I will be talking today about the politics, and I would like to remind you something very important, which is that we are talking based on personal analysis. The subject of the agreement is not a magic wand. Up till now, we didn't see even the results of the first meeting. So now we are just talking about the agreement. We don't have the results yet. And even the first meeting wasn't held yet. Allow me to talk about one point that was mentioned earlier. It is a problem that started a while ago and prompted the political faction to talk about that and about the different sovereign positions inside the LCB. So we had a deficit of more than 60 million riyal. How to face this deficit, even after increasing the taxes? $144 billion is expected to be the deficit soon, and the directors of or the authorities at the LCB didn't take into consideration such points or how the budget should be implemented and taken into account. And as well, they didn't respect the competencies of the LCB and the different authorities it had. So this is, in my own point of view, and based on the different indicators, the core of the problem, because the government, and for certain reasons, wanted to abide by a certain budget, and unfortunately, all of that had a big impact on the citizens. And even after increasing the taxes, the budget wasn't established based on the income of the government. So the government failed to administer the state affairs, and all that was reflected on the LCB. I am not saying that the LCB was working properly, but unfortunately, the government failed to establish a real and realistic budget based on the inputs, the taxes and other resources of the government, $3 billion, not more, and $24 billion coming from the oil revenues. So when the government establishes an unrealistic budget, we will be having, of course, a problem. Ms. Husni said that the UN didn't play a major role when establishing the agreement I do believe that it's the contrary. Of course, the internal factors and authorities played a major role, and the world and we know that the international actors wanted to have one actor or one authority. And said Mr. Misbah, any impact on regarding the oil will have an impact on the whole world. So it is not possible to take non-reasonable decisions. So we have the same, before the agreement, we used to have a division between authorities and having two different administrations, as well the absence of a budget, be it in the West. This was a major problem and a big gap in terms of the budget. The salaries were not paid, the development was not there, and the government was not working on a budget according to the recommendations. Foreign countries interfered as well in a clear way, imposing a certain point of view. And concerning your question related to the impact of the agreement on the balance of powers, according to the law of the LCB and the law of banks, we can say that previously, the LCB was interfering a lot in terms of the budget, the expenditures, how the expenditures are being disbursed, etc., based on interests and lobbies and certain directions. And we used to have a triangle representing the budget and the monetary department, as well as the oil institution, the oil corporation, and other resources. And the government was dispersing those resources, but should have done so in the channels of the government. We have as well a financial court that was monitoring all this process. But since the structure was not clear, since the budget was not clear, even the monitoring bodies had big trouble. and as well the relationship between the government and the LCB, knowing that that should have been cleared according to the law. That was not the case in reality. Concerning the positive points, we have resources that should be used in a proper way in order to have a balance between the governmental authorities, the LCB, and having Mr. Naji Isa, as well as the Commission will be liberated from all the previous agreements of the LCB, will be liberated from the lobbies, the military factions that were having an impact on the LCB, as well the MPs and the government should put the interest of the citizen first and work all on a budget, taking into consideration all the expenditures, so no one is being put aside in terms of the resources. And Mr. Naji has great opportunity, i.e. to work through a board. And this board will have a lot of responsibilities to shoulder and take the decision regardless of the military factions. So this is a great opportunity that Mr. Naji Isa should seize. How the foreign authorities or factions might have an impact, unfortunately, as I've said, that the world needs one authority in Libya to deal with. And the foreign actors wanted to have one person that is not controversial, a person that has expertise, that worked a lot for the LCB and can work with a board of directors and has a vice governor. So all that facilitated to have the deal and to choose another figure. And of course, it wasn't a magic wand, but it was a solution abiding but by what the international community present in Libya wanted. So we don't have a problem related to the halt of the oil production. At the end, concerning what might be the risks that we would have faced without this agreement, I don't have expectations in that regard, but the main point now is how Mr. Naji Isa is going to deal and manage the LCB in the upcoming period. So that's why the upcoming period will be very critical, and we need the coordination of all the authorities to avoid all divisions and to have budget very clear given by the MPs, by the House of Representatives, and the government establishing as well clear points and the budget abiding by the revenues and of the government. It is very important that the LCB works in an independent way. This is very important for the time being, and it should play a critical role, mainly in terms of budgeting and permitting expenditures based on the needs. So that is a big responsibility that Mr. Naji and the board of directors will have to shoulder. And it is very important that this conflict or this dispute that we have, what we had at the LCB, now should be treated inside the House of the Representative. The MPs should work on a clear budget, because it is very important that the revenues are divided in a just way. This is very important. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Esraa. You have answered all the questions that I have asked. Thank you so much. Very good answers. And we will give now the floor to Mr. Atiya Al-Fitouri. Of course, you all know that he is a lecturer from the University of Benghazi. And I would like to ask him about the economic expectations and how this stability or agreement will have an impact on the situation overall and mainly the economic situation. Hello, Professor Atiya. Thank you for participating. I give you now the floor asking you what are the economic opportunities after this agreement, and could that agreement foster an economic recovery? And what will be the role of LCB in terms of creating or restoring trust in the financial system? And we know that the new governor stated some recommendations in order to restore trust towards the LCB, the main monetary actor in the country. And what will be your point of view in terms of challenges? What will be the challenges on the medium and long term, mainly in terms of stability and the dependency on oil and the GDP? Finally, what will be the financial reforms that you would recommend from your standpoint, so we can move forward and take the needed measures? The floor is yours, Professor. Hello, welcome to you and to the dear attendees and participants. The economic recovery based on the latest developments related to LCB are measures that we all do believe are in the right direction. The LCB was governed by one person, while now we have a board of directors. So we have 8 individuals. Those measures are in the right direction, but will they lead to a recovery? That is another subject. We know that any economy in the world works based on different factors and actors. In the monetary sector, the monetary sector is handled by the central bank, but we have other sectors that are not under the umbrella of the government. So each and every actor or party has a role to play. So each sector has its own role to play and shoulders different responsibilities. And it is very important to have a consensus and coordination between the central bank and the government, or between the monetary main actor and the executive authority. I.e., we need a willingness from the government, and up till now that is questionable. The tools that the central bank is using will have an impact on the investment, the stability of the currency, i.e. the dinar, and all those tools up till now are still non-functional. So all of the tools related to the monetary policy, the open market, and other tools are not being used currently. We don't have an interest rate that the central bank could abide by. As well as the deposit certificates were used by the central bank in 2007 in order to absorb liquidity, while now we mainly don't have any certificate of those kinds. So the central bank will have to activate all those tools if it wants to succeed, mainly with all the revenues that we have in foreign currency and in national currency as well. The government has as well tools and obligations that it should abide by in order to help the central bank in terms of recovery. The government should provide the infrastructure, the investment in infrastructure, electricity, communication, transportation, as well as a tax on production, and partnership between the public and the private sectors, as well as the protection of the economic activity, mainly any activity that goes to the international level, imports and exports. So all those are the obligations of the government. Needless to say that the LCB has obligations as well as the government. The LCB will have to manage the banking sector and the relationship between the public and the banking sectors. A lot of businessmen and individuals don't have trust towards the LCB nor the banking sector in Libya. So the LCB should try to stabilize the value of the Libyan dinar. It is now impossible to increase the value of the Libyan dinar because we have an excess of foreign dinars, and we cannot devaluate the Libyan dinar neither. Because unfortunately, we had transactions that were not needed previously, such as in 2018, where a tax was imposed on foreign currencies, and all that was maintained in 2024, and the decrease was of 70%. So that had an impact on individuals' lives and abolished the trust between the individuals and the banking sector. So the LCB can activate some of the tools that are at its disposal and ask the House of Representatives to take into consideration the needed measures and convince as well the businessman through stabilizing the value of the Libyan dinar. The LCB and the governor should have a stance related to the Libyan dinar, saying it should be stable, and that during all the meetings and through the commercial chambers, because there we have the big amounts of money, and at least part of that money should be restored. More than 60, the equivalent of $60 billion dollars in Libyan dinar. So it is very important to restore the trust. That is very important. In addition to the different needed measures, and hopefully that the LCB will be able to continue working on this process. We are now at the beginning, and during the first period, we will have a demand on foreign currency, not only for exports, but in order to retain foreign currency, because a lot of people are still afraid and suspicious and would like to Unfortunately, we are unable to hear Mr. Atiya well. So a lot of people would like to retain foreign currencies. Needless to say that we have a lot of challenges that the LCB will be facing soon. First of all, corruption. We have a lot of corruption, and maybe the corruption will increase even more. We have many channels that might ask for foreign currency, and the LCB should have control and monitoring in order to decrease the scope of corruption. Even TV channels talked about the corruption, the commodities that are not requested, etc. And now the LCB is following up and conducting inspections. So this is pushing dealers to work according to the rules established by the LCB. Of course, auditing companies will be of great help in that regard. Another challenge that the LCB will be facing, the governmental expenditure. We have seen that those expenditures increased during the past years, going way more or way beyond the revenues, the oil revenues and other revenues coming from taxes, etc. So the government should cooperate with the LCB because this is a real challenge. And if the government doesn't cooperate, that of course will impede the LCB from working on the economic recovery. And concerning the oil revenues, of course, it is not recommended to decrease the oil production. So when we talk about all the shops, electronics, clothes, etc., so all that is being imported. And that's why we only have the oil as main revenue. So $1,300,000 or barrels, excuse me, is the daily production. Another challenge is the oil prices. During the past period, the barrel was at $82, and now $74. So a decrease of $8 approximately. Knowing that previously the price was $90. Nowadays, the price of a barrel is of $74, and that is a main challenge. So this volatility in terms of oil prices is a big challenge, and we hope that in the upcoming future that won't be the case. I know that all that is related to external factors as well, but should be taken into consideration. Concerning the reforms, the economic reforms, it is very important to restructure the Lebanese economy and to encourage the private sector. We do believe that the private sector is able to produce because it has flexibility in terms of production. And maybe in the past, we had some periods where we didn't have a good private sector working on distribution, manufacturing, production, etc. But now we do have a sector that is not built in a full-fledged way, but it is very important to work on a sector fostering production because we cannot still be keen on imports because all that because the import sector is pushing us to have a dependency on the dollar and foreign currencies. Of course, we need to encourage the national production in all the possible ways. And thank God, up till now, we we are not part of the WTO, because you know that being a member at the WTO will come with a lot of obligations and recommendations. We are still at the observer status at the WTO, and if and of course, we do have the problem of smuggling, not only smuggling of oil, but smuggling of a lot of commodities. And you know that the market, the Libyan market, is cheap in comparison with the markets around. And that's why smuggling increased during the past period of time. Unfortunately, we are unable to hear the speaker quite well. Concerning the different codes, such as the code of the monetary sector, etc., all those codes and laws are good, but will need some amendments, because the circumstances of their inception are different from our current circumstances. We do have currently a law, but unfortunately, we are a country that does not respect the law. We do have a law regarding public debt, a law that provides that we cannot have any public debt unless it is issued through a law. So a law determining the period of time and determining the different factors related to the debt. But we still see that the government takes loans from the LCB without any legal and formal procedures. So we do have now a public debt that is of more than $160 billion and not $84 billion as mentioned in different documents. So mainly that was related to different parts of the country. So we have to take a few things into consideration. And if we have an LCB with a board of governors, now that should be done, and those measures should be taken. We welcomed the board of directors, but unfortunately, this board of directors is not abiding by the Article 14 of the law of banking sector, providing whom or the competencies of the different members of the board of directors. So now all those whom are in the board of director are accountants. That is against the law, because we need legal experts and we need experts in different fields as well. So unfortunately, all those subjects should be taken into consideration and reconsidered. And we need to have a commission for monetary policy formed by experts of monetary policy. So this is very important. Thank you so much. So the main points were first the problem in terms of managing the revenues at the light of the conflict, the international community and how it can, in a dynamic and realistic way, help and assist in order to put an end to the Libyan Central Bank deadlock. And luckily, they were able to do so. Third, to go back to a legal structure of the LCB. We have talked as well about the national interest and how to distribute in a just way the resources. We have said as well that all the conflicts are of economic origins, and how the division in the banking sector started in 2014 and the issues were not resolved. And unfortunately, problems increased, leading to the deadlock that we had. And that had an impact on the national currency, the devaluation of the Libyan currency, and had an impact as well on the role of the LCB that played a role that is outside of its own competencies and authorities. Mr. Husni talked about the internal pressure that was the main factor that led to an agreement in Libya, and that is a positive point relatively. Another point related to the wealth that is sometimes one way in one direction. And I hope that I have grasped the idea here correctly, that the wealth should be spread on two ways. We have talked as well about the governmental failure, the absence of budget, as well as the foreign interference in the Libyan affairs. And that had a great impact on the situation that was mentioned by Ms. Esraa and Ms. Husni. We have mentioned different factors that might have an impact on the situation, such as the militias groups impact, and we have talked about how can Mr. Isa move things forward, and how it is important to put the central bank at a distance of all the political disputes. We have talked as well about the economic and monetary situation in Libya and how the Libyan Central Bank should activate many tools and cooperate and communicate with the government. The government as well should activate its tools in order to improve the situation. We have talked about the expenditures, the corruption, and how the challenges might have an impact on the agreement. The professor mentioned as well that the solution is in restructuring the Libyan economy. I would like at the end to thank you for your participation. I would like to thank all the speakers. I would like to thank all the attendees, and I would like to thank all the organizers who made this webinar possible. And Mr. Ricardo, Ms. Olivia, Professor Seth, Mr. Mark Freeman, I would like to thank you all. The discussions today were very rich, and I hope that we had presented a new vision that might create a bit of stability and answer some of the questions that we and all Libyans are asking. Hopefully, we will continue on working together and translate what was discussed today in concrete measures. Thank you one more time, and hopefully we will meet in other occasions very soon. I would like to thank as well IFIT, the Institute for Integrated Transitions, that facilitated the session today. Thank you so much. you.